sitting down and a news flash. And my face is on CNN, MSNBC. So one of my first jobs was to drop literature, informational literature off to different offices and knock on doors and introduce myself. And I remember thinking to myself, this is kind of like what my great-grandmother did on suffrage. And it really did feel like walking in her, because this was about gender too, and that we needed to be protected in recognition that we are equal before the law, right? But all these out LGBTQ folks and women of color who are now in Congress and all of that, I think the vast majority really understand that if we're going to effectuate change, we need a seat literally at the tables where decisions are being made. And I'm so grateful that we're able to do that now, and to hopefully in the next few decades really push for changes that really will mean something in the Bronx or in rural South Dakota for Native communities on reservations, or the queer kid in outside of LA who's just wants to go to school and become a scientist and doesn't want to deal with harassment. If someone who shares that experience is at the table in Washington or in Sacramento at the state capitol, or even at the city level, or even little school committee level, that matters. Yeah. And I think that's what I tapped in and understood. I thought, if anything, okay, the local gay community is going to find out, because I would be the first openly trans political appointee inside of the White House, fully a member of staff. There had been an intern, but in terms of actual member of White House staff, this was the historical moment. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to show up to work. And I am literally sitting down and a news flash, because we had put out the National Center for Transgender Equality and the White House had decided we're going to make a little bit of noise about this is great. It's a significant moment, trans person working at the White House. And my face is on CNN, MSNBC. I'm getting texts, and I shut my phone off, and I'm like, okay, it was really important for me that people met Raffi, not the transgender person, not the spectacle, and so, but yet, in the White House, in every other room, there's a TV,
they watch
and
the
everyone
news.
watches. They watch the news, and so by midday, I'm hearing that's her. But I remember my boss at the end of the day saying, how do you feel? And I remember saying to him, Dave, I'm here to do my job, but it's great for the community, and everyone was just so supportive and thankful and visibly happy.
Yeah.
My career in the last few years has really taken me a little bit away from more of the street organizing that is happening, et cetera. But, I think the obligation I feel every day is that people understand I am accessible, I am part of the community. As a dear friend of mine puts it, girl, you have access, so help open doors for others, right? And I think that's part of it, is with this comes incredible responsibility. And it's not just me, it's a whole generation of trans people and others, right? Of all different experiences, saying we're here and we want to be part of this thing that we call democracy, that's messy, that's complicated, that for the last 4 years has been incredibly difficult at times, and yet what's so exciting is that people like me show up. And what I'm looking forward to is the folks that are very fast behind me. I think I tell my team at work all the time, what I ask for you every day is to do your best and to be your best. And I think that's the thing that we as a community want out of people that are in public service. Yeah. And I think that's what's so exciting and refreshing about the change that we're seeing, not only here in Washington, but around the country, about people stepping up and saying, you know what, I'm gonna try my best, and I'm gonna try advocating for the community, and let's do it, because by not trying, we're not doing, and we need to do.
Yeah. Are there other examples of challenges that face the trans community today, even still, that
unfortunately, transgender people still face incredible levels of discrimination. We have very high unemployment rates compared to the general population. This past year, in fact, was the highest numbers reported of trans people being killed in the United States. I think there are a lot of reasons behind that we're still trying to figure out. Certainly poverty, discrimination, the lack of access to live in safe communities in jurisdictions that take our lives seriously. I think there's a difference of experience for trans people who might be living in a state like Massachusetts compared to a state like Alabama. But even then, in Massachusetts, we've seen terrible things happen. And it might not result in someone being killed, God forbid, but, people still experience a lot of stigma. We have made a lot of strides, but there's still a lot of work to go. The one good thing is that the laws are starting to really catch up. And actually, last year, the Supreme Court ruled on a case about a trans woman who worked at the time at a funeral parlor and was fired. Her name was Amy Stevens. Unfortunately, Amy passed last year, but what's great about her legacy is that it was a decision by the Supreme Court that said discrimination against transgender people and gay, lesbian, bisexual folks as well is a form of illegal sex discrimination in a workplace setting and cannot be. And so in the area of employment, certainly it is so exciting because it now means trans people across the country, even in those jurisdictions like Mississippi that don't have local protections, federal law still applies. And so that if a trans person is working at a laboratory or might be a local school teacher who decides to transition, they can't get fired now. Mm-hmm. That's incredibly important. And I'm not a lawyer, but some of the lawyers would argue, and it now opens the floodgates for all types of coverage in all areas like healthcare, like public accommodations, etc. And so while there's work still to be done, and one of the things that I'm very excited that I know my colleagues are working at here in Washington to pass a bill known as the Equality Act that would, basically say all these things, all these areas are protected areas for LGBTQ folks. There can't be discrimination, housing and education, all of that. We have seen progress happen. And that's why I really do believe in my lifetime we're going to see what I would call full legal equality. I think that what the jury is out around lived equality. Okay, so how does that actually work out in practice? And I think we're going to have to still go through it. But what's great is it no longer matters what jurisdiction you're living in. We used to sort of say to ourselves, we need to make sure we're in a safe jurisdiction like New York City or California. You don't want to get a flat tire in Wyoming because there are no protections there. And if you try and get help, they could discriminate against you, all those things. Well, if we pass the Equality Act, or if we get similar types of court rulings like we got last year, it means we are protected anywhere essentially the United States flag is flown where we have jurisdiction, mm-hmm. right? And that is so important because it goes to the other thing that I think is really key is LGBTQ folks, all folks, of course, we should just be able to live our lives. I say to a lot of the LGBTQ youth that I meet with, I just want you to be successful in what you want to be, whether it's a doctor or maybe you'll be one of those cool scientists that figures out how we're going to live on another planet because look what we're doing to our planet. But the point is, I want them to also just focus on that. And yes, be proud of being LGBTQ, but we, the community, don't expect everyone to be an LGBTQ activist because at some point we should all be out of a job mm-hmm. because the job should be done. We won, we got it, we got our rights. But as we've seen, of course, with Black folks and Native folks and women and all the different issues that we still deal with, 100 years after suffrage, women are still not equal in this country. And so the work continues, but that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I feel like it's my part, and I am always very horrified at the amount of poverty that we have in this country, regardless of what shade or creed or religion or sexual orientation or gender identity some individuals or families are. In fact, I am from a very, very poor country. My own birth mother was illiterate, and many of the reasons why she couldn't care for me is that she was poor. And knowing that kind of poverty is also in our country, we do a lot of smoke and mirrors to make sure that we cover it up. But that's, to me, almost a violation of human rights and dignity. And so as long as there's that type of suffering that's happening, I feel called to do it. And I think it's exactly what was discussed at that dinner table with my parents, which is being very aware of what's happening in the world. And I grew up in a progressive Jewish community that believed in social action, and that we are, whether you want to believe it, it's something that God or whatever, jury's still out for me about that kind of stuff. But I think what I learned more was that it is your obligation to help humanity, to give back, and that's what you're supposed to do to be a good person.
Yeah. Just hearing how you've navigated your life, it seems very natural for you to be an advocate for others, because you can experience so many different perspectives and be able to be so freaking easy to talk to also. But I don't know, for me, I'm thinking in my head, like, you are incredibly successful at understanding and owning your story. People don't really give that a lot of credit, but it's hard to own, and it's hard to appreciate sometimes as well. And I feel like you've done so much work too in trying to figure that out. And you have so much insight into history. It makes me really appreciate history as well, and where our country has been. But thank you so much for that.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome.